We're going to be talking about the movie The Atom Project. And for this show, we really want it to be a laid back conversation, not necessarily a debate, but just going back and forth in this conversation, not knowing exactly where things are going to go. If you guys are down for that, just sit back, relax, grab yourself some popcorn, some snacks, or maybe do a puzzle or do something, Alex, something that you can be doing while you're listening and just indulging in this conversation that we're about to
Yeah,
have. So
yeah, this is great, way to kind of take a step back from everything going on in your day and just kind of relax and listen to 2 guys talk about a movie.
where I want to start with our discussion today is why are we talking about this movie? Why do you think it's important for us to talk about this one today?
We're talking about this movie today, mainly because it's on Netflix and it came out recently, and it's a great family movie. Or even if you're just watching it by yourself, it's a fun and enjoyable watch for sure. Of course, we've got Ryan Reynolds is the main star of it, and he absolutely kills it once again. Accompanied by Walker Scobell, Mark Ruffalo, and Zoe Saldana, all do great jobs in their roles. Really fun to watch, and as well as being dramatic. It was a lot more um, on the adult side than I was expecting, and they do a very good job of keeping it wholesome as well as making it for a more mature audience without going too mature. And so that's why a big reason why I think we're talking about it is this really appeals to a lot of different audiences without going too far into any of them.
It appeals to a bunch of different audiences. And I also think that this movie is this movie is a departure, I think, from where I think Hollywood overall, just being a movie fan and watching what's been coming out lately in Hollywood. It's a departure from some of these established franchises, especially in science fiction. I think it's trying to blaze its own path. This movie does stand on its own, which I think is so refreshing, especially for this genre during this era of movie making.
Yeah, definitely. It really does, like you said, do a great job of kind of playing off of older tropes, but putting all of them on its own spin. It does a good job of building the world that you understand rather than how does all this time travel work? I don't know, it just does. So it does a really great job of blending those different sci-fi tropes into a cohesive story and cohesive world as a whole and have it all make sense, which is a great thing to see in a sci-fi movie because sometimes that does not happen.
So, Alex, moving on to just getting into more of our detailed thoughts and opinion on the movie. And just to say, or up front, this is our opinion on the movie.
Mhm.
We don't necessarily say that this is how you should feel about the movie. And everyone's opinion is valid. If you've seen the movie, it's going to hit you in different ways. But what were your first reactions, like your raw emotions and reactions, when you first saw this movie?
I mean, first reactions were very surprised, and I was genuinely moved by some of the different themes to where seeing the main character go through different parts of life all at the same time. So seeing how his future self tried to let his younger self stand up for, like, try to do his own thing and be like, "Hey, you have to get beat up this fight, otherwise you're not gonna do well." But then seeing how that affected his future self and how that really affected that character really brought it into the fact of you you care about your past self, even if you know you have to go through hardship, there's still that care that you have. That really kind of brought it into focus for me too, where sure, I'm looking to the future, but I still need to take care of my current self and make sure that I know what I'm doing and kind of moving through life that way. And so like that raw emotion of I need like that care of like being kind to people, even if you think they need to go through this hardship, maybe they don't. Maybe they go through it and then you help them after, like what he did. Or maybe you stand up for it and you say, no, this is going to be where I stand. And now that I've gone through what you had to, I'm going to make sure that you don't. Another thing that I kind of latched onto was all the stuff about the hardship with losing the father. I've got some family stuff going on right now, which it's nothing happening anytime soon, but that kind of hit with me too,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like
for
growing
sure,
up
man.
without like the father figure. Obviously, I'm like 20 something now, so it's not quite as the same impact, but seeing how that affects a kid and how that affects your future self and how you see the world based on how you were
Mhm.
treated by your dad, how much attention you were given, and how you don't necessarily know the full story. And that really put it in perspective for me because now that I'm at this age, I can see the full story of how my mom deals with things, how my dad deals with different things. And
Mhm.
so having that realization both in real life and through the film really hit me to where it's like, "Oh, I need to." I'm usually decent about trying to get every side of the conversation, but it really hammered it home to where you don't know what someone else is going through. Maybe they're having the greatest day of their life, but also they might be putting on a face to make it seem like they're having the greatest day of their life, when in reality, you saying something a little uplifting could make their day 100 times better, or just a hug, or just, like, saying hi to someone that you've passed by, or saying, "Hey, how's it going?" Like, and actually asking, "How's everything going?" Or spending quality time with people. That really hit me for, like, the raw emotion of, wow, like, family is very important and it shapes who you are. And sure, I've thought about it a lot, but it really hit that fact home of how you are with your family and how your parents interact with you really shapes who you are.
Obviously, with your situation, man, I mean, it's gonna evoke a lot of emotions.
Mhm.
Yeah, did you get choked up?
A little bit, but not. I have a good reputation of not getting choked up in general. Um, so it's one of those where it's like I'll feel the emotion, but I don't usually feel too choked up about it. But yeah, I mean there was definitely emotion there. I got a little choked up at certain points, and like seeing kind of towards the end where like everything kind of hit back home and hit together, and like when they went back to their own timelines and how he kind of came to that realization. It's like I need to spend more time. Like sure, I'm doing this to build his future, but I need to be there for him now to build the future. My dad did a lot of traveling when I was younger, but then when I was growing, like having like the growing years, he made an effort to be home, and I never really thought about that until different moments, and this really brought that thought back to me of he took the effort out and made that time to make sure I knew who he was and like how he acted and made sure became my own person, but had his influence. So it wasn't just influence of the world or influence of other people or trying to figure it out myself. So having that influence really made a huge impact. So that definitely brought back some of those emotions.
Yeah, and it's something we're gonna get into so much deeper, I think, as we continue this conversation because there's just so much to go into there. And I asked you that question because I wanted to not feel alone, here. But I cried, man. I My dad is in my life, but coming from a broken home and him not being there,
Hmm.
all the time or having different things. So I guess the father figure part really sticks out to me in a lot of movies and a lot of things I watch, and the mother figure too, because the mother was also important too. I'm not trying to,
Yeah, definitely.
say that that wasn't, but yeah, man, I think my raw emotion is it really moved me, like you said. It just filled me with so many emotions and a lot of reflection after. And I think mostly I had a good time. I think mostly it was fun. It wasn't just this sort of
Yeah, it wasn't
uh
an emotional roller coaster, but it had those kind of deeper moments.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't an emotional roller coaster at the end. You're not feeling like, "Oh, man, like, I would never watch that movie again." Ryan Reynolds, his humor, his, ability to be so charismatic. Ryan Reynolds just puts on one heck of a performance as that version of himself,
Hmm.
which I think helps to really carry the other, scenes. I think the casting was great, and
Definitely. They play off of the chemistry between him and Zoe Saldana is phenomenal. It reminded me of, the first Star Trek movie with Chris Pine and, Zoe Saldana. Like, that chemistry, she's great with almost anybody. She did it with Chris Pine and Chris Pratt, and now with, Ryan Reynolds, and every time she just nails kind of that BA wife or girlfriend or love interest or whatever it is. and she just nails, like, having that grit to it and being the mature one on that side of the relationship. And in a different twist, Ryan Reynolds brings like a deeper side and that deeper charisma to it rather than just being charming and whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna
He
say
does a
that
great
too.
job of like really bringing it down to earth and like, hey, I'm serious too. Like we like this isn't just a one way street. I'm not always funny. I can be serious too. And he's just great at it.
A lot of people that use comedy, right? They use it as a defense mechanism or as a mask to hide their true feelings and their true pain because, like it's mentioned in the movie, it's easier to bury that stuff and to take the easy way out in dealing with your mess than it is to actually deal with it because you might not like what you have to do to uncover and
Yeah.
heal from that.
It's easier to put on a smile than deal with the issue and easier to bury it behind snarky remarks and everything like what we see with the younger version and seeing how he's able to kind of deflect everything and everything going on after his dad died and everything with the comedy and being the like the smart ass and how all of that kind of plays into it rather than talking with his mom about what's happening, like talking about how they're both grieving and seeing it from both sides of the conversation. He's really trying to be strong and doesn't think about kind of the full side, which is hard for him to do because he's such a young kid. And that but then with Ryan Reynolds, he brings that in of, "I had to go through all of this, and now I understand what my mom went through," and he brings that vulnerability out so well, and then just has, like, the icing of the comedy with it, like, he still is as snarky towards his younger self, and he knows what he's gonna do, and he knows these different comments, but he really brings out that like you were saying, the vulnerability with the conversation at the bar with his mom, like, seeing and, like, telling her like, "Hey, you're not the like, you're
That might
grieving
have been my
too."
that conversation at the bar real quick might have been my favorite scene.
So phenomenal, so good. Jennifer Gardner knocked it out of the park, and then with Ryan Reynolds and his just amazing way like, the weight behind his words is just so well done, and he delivers those lines effortlessly, it seems like, and he falls into that role so well. I gotta give props to Walker Scobell as well because he did a great job of kind of reflecting that energy when it was there, when it was high and when it was low and when it was intense. He did a great job of like being the kid in that scenario without being like the kid actor that sometimes you don't really get a good emotion off of or it doesn't seem to fit. He was so great at reflecting those emotions and showing kind of how those can be portrayed as a kid too, which was great to see someone opposite of Ryan Reynolds that wasn't a female co-star, because that's what we normally see. And so seeing this new kind of person he can work with, it opens so many doors that he can walk through now. And with the scene with Mark Ruffalo too, when he's talking about like when you weren't there, like you were more focused on your work than you were with me. And seeing how he was able to be in that intense of a role with the father figure as well and his younger self. It was just really cool to see him in like 4 or 5 different scenarios that we haven't really seen him in.
Let's go into the story. What are your thoughts on the story, man? The main themes, the message behind what the movie is about. What how did that stuff sort of strike you and what were your thoughts?
Well, for the main themes and stuff, kind of talked about it a little bit with the raw emotions, where like those themes of the father figure and those themes of kind of being there for your family rather than for work, even though you're there for work for your family, it it almost never fully translates that way. And being kind of making sure you're there in the present because no matter what time you're in,
Mm.
it's always the present and
That
you
was
always
my
have
main
to be
takeaway too.
present. And so like being yeah, so, like, being present is huge for any era you're in, whether it's the, like, younger version, the mid version, or the older version, you're always gonna have, like, that time makes the difference.
I just wanted to say the quote from Mark Ruffalo who plays the dad in this movie. It's just it's always later than you think.
Yeah.
It's later than you think is such a powerful theme throughout the movie and just a powerful thing to think about in general, like you were saying, man. Like
Mhm.
going throughout your day, it's the movie is about time travel, so obviously it's gonna have themes about time, you know, not having enough time, needing more time. What do
Mhm.
you do with the time you have left? You know, all of those time travel things. But the philosophy was there. It's about healing. It's about hope and inspiration. It's not cynical, you know, because
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds, I think, you know, with Deadpool and some of these other things. I mean, when you're sarcastic and it's because you're cynical and because
Mm.
you know, there's all these, terrible things that happen to you. But I love how in this movie they're trying to heal that, they're trying to heal that, that side of him that he's cynical because he's you know, he lost his father and because he's that emotion that he hadn't been dealing with is still there,
Mhm.
and so I love that. So it did talk about time, you know, obviously time is one of the main focuses of this movie, but I
Yeah.
did also love the explorations of some of the ideas of how to heal that, and it just makes you feel good when at the end of the movie, when all of that comes full circle and everything that's been set up culminates in just some beautiful scenes of hugging your
Mhm.
mother, playing catch with your dad. These less exciting things, but are more deeply powerful, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
does a great job of making it feel like it's a superficial thing, but then digging deeper into that and really showing everyone how deep this simple idea can be.
I mean, just the whole scene that we mentioned earlier about when he goes to the bar and sees his mom. Ryan Reynolds' character, the older character, comes into the bar and sees his mom, and she comes and she's kind of complaining about her day. You know, she's complaining to the bartender a little bit because she's had a rough time, a rough couple days, and her son is who's sitting right there, you know, across from her. She
Mhm.
doesn't know, but he needed to hear what she said. She said, "It's all gonna be good. I love him. You know, I know that he's going through a tough time right now." And in hearing that, it also helped him to heal a little bit in that moment, even though that was the beginning
Mhm.
of his story. And you can tell that it affected him because his reaction to seeing her and to hearing her is he speaks out and he
Yeah.
says that your son doesn't hate you and all of this other stuff. And so it's almost like you can heal the past. It's not too late to heal the past. You know, you hear the like all of that type of stuff with movies
Mhm.
like this, but handled so well because when they have that interaction, I did feel like I was watching someone from the future talking to their mother who's a lot younger
Yep.
and who has no idea what their son is gonna go through and what their life is gonna be like in the future. You know, she's just kind of
Yeah.
worried about you know her 12-year-old right there, but there's allusions throughout the movie to the future, right? Like she talks about how he's gonna be as a teenager, but then it's so funny when that's woven together with a literal time traveler
Yeah.
being part of it, man. So yeah, so I think I want to you know definitely touch on those smaller moments, those uh, not the big action scenes that, are the sci-fi, tropes, but just these things that go off the beaten path and take us into places that were so unexpected, but would you say relatable?
Yeah, like, things that really drew in anybody. There's a lot of different situations that you could relate to, not just they didn't just focus on one and kind of hammer that home all like the entire film. There was the struggle with like father-son relationship, struggle with the mother-son relationship, struggle with yourself, like how to deal with guilt and how to deal with grief. And it really did a great job of having all of these smaller moments that kind of brought these themes out that still made them relatable and still brought them to the table for anybody to enjoy, whether or not you're going through that at the moment. It gives an insight to what people that are going through that kind of feel and gives you an insight of how you might be able to help them.
And, the time traveling aspect is ultimately a way for the father and son relationship to kinda be healed a little bit, for them to have a conversation. I mean, it's kind of extreme, but we can all relate to either needing to say something to our dad or if we're a parent, saying something to our kids and
Mhm.
telling them that, like what Mark Ruffalo said, which, you know, by the way, brought so much joy and happiness and all the emotions to my heart, is at the end, you know, when he has that moment with them, with his kids. With
Mhm.
his just one kid, but in 2
But
different
different
versions.
generations, yeah.
and I love their reactions, and we can get into that, but, but just kinda reiterating that point, man, it's like we can all relate to needing to say something to our kids or saying something to our parents. I'm not always going to be there for you. And if I wasn't there for you, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. He is sorry, but he's also saying, like you said, I think in the beginning of your first reactions, it's like their absence from you doesn't mean that they love you any less or that there's something
Mhm.
wrong. It's just that it's good for them to be there though as well. It's kind of the two. It's like they have to know that you'll love them forever no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter what happens to you. And that's good, but it's also good to also be there when you're able to be there and to have those moments of relationship and connection because you're going to remember those when you grow up. You're going to remember when you get old, you're going to think about your dad, you're going to think about your mom, you're going to think about them a lot because you're maybe at the age where they were when they had you or when you were growing up. And it's funny how our perspectives can change when we get more mature and things like that. So I just love seeing those smaller moments. I loved seeing those intimate scenes that I think were very relatable to where we're at right now, but also where we're probably gonna be one day,
Yeah.
when we have kids or whatever, and seeing them wanting what's best for them, but knowing that you're probably not gonna be there for them all the time,
Right, like, knowing there's
how do
gonna
you
be a
balance that?
point where, like, you've done all you can. Like, have you done all you can? And, like, what can you do to make sure that you do kinda thing.
Man, and we don't go into therapy and stuff here. We won't go into like, personal details, but growing up in a broken home, and my dad was around way more than what other dads or other
Mhm,
parents who get divorced are around. I was so fortunate, God is so fortunate in blessing my family that way. But there's this longing, in my heart, I think for a lot of people as well. Like there's this longing for just that close relationship with your dad, for your dad to see what you're doing, and he might not understand everything that you're doing, but just to feel um your dad sees you and appreciates you and is proud of you.
mhm,
And those are big, and it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be a child or you could be an adult yourself, and we're always gonna be to our dad, to our father, we're always gonna be that baby that when you were born, he was there to see you, most of the time.
mhm,
So I have this interesting relationship with my dad where, he's not around, or he wasn't around, but he still like, loves you and still cares about you and stuff like that. If you just think about where's my dad, you're going to be disappointed because he's not there. You're going to be like, what's his problem? And I think
mhm,
that the reality that your parents aren't perfect, is another big thing too. It's like they might try to act like everything's is good. And sometimes you have to do that. You have to kind of pretend, make sure that the kids are okay and that they don't feel like, something's their fault or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you're broken, and there's so much heartbreak
yeah,
and stuff that happens. So I could feel that. I could feel the heartbreak, and just knowing that that heartbreak was being healed and that those moments at the end was something that was enough
mhm,
to that was enough for me to feel that brokenness in my own heart, and kind of feel
yeah,
that reconciliation. I'm like, you know what? I love my dad so much, and definitely wanted to call him and call my mom and just let them know. I think that's what movies can do is that they can
yeah,
stir you. So,
yeah, they can bring up those emotions and really do a good job of, like, wanting making you want to do something that you didn't think you'd want to do, but now you have kind of that realization where, "Huh, I should reach out to this person," or, "I should tell them how I feel about this," or how I should act about kind of give you an insight of how they might feel about it, and maybe wanting to reach out to them to hear their side. And
mm,
with movies like this, they do a great job of showing all those angles and, like I said before, making a cohesive story with still like 5 different angles of time travel and how time works and how time passes, but still like bringing it all together into one story and one main character of how one person's life affects so many others and how
mm.
like time really affects how everyone behaves with everything.
But I felt like it focused more on the past, and it focused more on healing the wounds of the past by also being present and thinking
Mm,
about the future. So I know I'm talking about all three, but I just think it's rooted in the past, but it's all this idea like when they start at the very end of the movie, right? They start to think about their interaction, and they're like, so the kid hugs his mom, like what
mm,
his older self said, remember to hug your mom and give her a really good hug. It's so worth being able to invest your time into a piece of artwork and coming out of it a little bit changed.
mhm.
I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, there's just so much we can talk about with the just the overall storyline. I think that that is for me the strongest part of the movie. It's the story, it's the uh developing these relationships and healing the past, all that stuff is there. So what were your thoughts on, things like the editing and the effects and stuff like that?
I think they did a pretty good job. There weren't any things that really stood out to me, which is kind of a testament to their visual effects and their editors. Because usually if something goes wrong on that side on the technical, it's only because it sticks out. The deep fake with the main villain of the film, which
It's like
was
Maya or
Maya,
something, right?
yeah, Maya
Yeah,
Sorian.
yeah,
So kind of
she had the deep fake.
the deep fake slash CGI rebuild of her face for a younger version of herself, it didn't land very well, and I think that's
Yeah,
just because it was a lower budget Netflix movie, unlike having the likes of Disney to be able to recreate something like that, like they did with Luke in Boba Fett, which was a beautiful render and beautiful, very well done, CG render for a younger Mark Hamill, and so I think that's just kind of a budget restriction where you need them in the story, so you kinda just have to bite that bullet a little bit and just keep on moving. I think they did a good job of not having too many, like, close-up shots with her, and there was only, like, the 1 or 2 when you first meet her that it was like, "Okay, this is a little janky, a little rough," but, like, in all the scenes with the, like, collider and everything where they kind of keep a little bit further back, it's not quite as obvious of how smooth the texture is where it shouldn't be or different things like that from a, effects standpoint. But I loved all the stuff with the staff and the kind of when you kill someone outside of their time, they have that whole, like, vapor trail effect, which is, like, bleeding back into the timeline type stuff, and I thought that was really cool and a great way to kind of show that it's not you don't just die in a different timeline and you're there. It's like, no, you're erased from that timeline because you're not where you're
yeah, that
supposed
was
to be.
cool.
Yeah, I loved kind of it was almost a pixelization effect to where they kind of just vaporized through, and it's really cool how they did that. So I was impressed with those effects. As far as editing and, cinematography, I think they did good. There wasn't anything super impressive because a lot of the stuff was CG towards the end, and that was kind of their main action was with the collider. I will say I loved the initial cabin fight when, Zoe Saldana first shows up, and so getting kind of seeing them go back to back and getting those different effects and with seeing the staff for the first time, I was like, That's definitely a lightsaber," or whatever, and but having it have its own effects, not just be a lightsaber effect. It was cool to see how they kind of played with that idea of future tech without it being crazy overpowered.
100%, man. I agree with all of that. I think the effects that stood out to me were definitely when they died and everything, that particle effect, that like almost like that like a mist. It was kind of
Mhm.
cool. But
A
I
blend
also
of
really
different
enjoyed.
effects with it. It was really cool.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed the cloaking stuff too. What did you think
Yeah.
of that? Because it's like, how are you supposed to have time travel if you know what I mean? There were some parts that I had problems with it because they weren't
The
using it at
DNA
certain
thing
points
was
and
a
then
little
not using
weird.
it.
Yeah, the DNA restriction where it's like if your body isn't completely healed, you can't use it was a little weird to me.
It was a
Um
plot device for sure, and
oh, definitely.
I think that the cloaking was cool. But yeah, what did you think of it? Sometimes they used it, sometimes they didn't. That kind of got me a little bit peeved, but a little nitpick,
Yeah,
there. But
I think they used it in a lot of good places, but yeah, like you're saying, when they didn't, it was kind of that moment of they used it for shock value to uncloak versus like, why would you uncloak if it doesn't really help your
you're
situation?
you're flying above the highway where people can see your ship, and you're like
Yeah,
not
and you're
cloaked.
not cloaked at all, and so you see
You're
all
like
these people
blowing
from the
people
wrong
up.
timeline seeing your ship.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. It's gonna have those different things that are gonna be for shock value, and
Yeah.
they'll maintain a lot of the realism as much as they can, but at some point, it just kind of moves into that realm.
This is a great piece of, I think, science fiction. I think that the CGI, the deep fake could have been much better.
And usually with
Mhm.
deep fakes, it turns into when you turn to the side and the light kind of hits a different way, or when you, are, like, moving forward and it doesn't track perfectly, you can see a shift in the lips or a shift in the eyes a little bit.
Breaking down those technical aspects, I think that the movie has a lot to offer in that realm,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't say that it is a strength of the movie is the VFX and those
Yeah.
editing choices. Although I will say one thing about the music choice, I picked up a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy vibes.
Yeah, definitely.
Not just
They'll
because of Zoe Saldana, being there, but, the music choices, the classic rock, Led Zeppelin was in there a little bit,
Mhm.
some of the other, classic music choices that were used throughout the movie, which also were edited well and timed well with
Mhm.
things like the scene where he's escaping in the beginning of the movie. I think that they did a great job selecting music. If you're gonna do music in an action, adventure, science fiction world, I think that you can't go wrong with having some, classic rock and some, Guardians of the Galaxy, they're such a great example. It captures a character. I think the movie has its own
Mhm.
character, and it's not just Ryan Reynolds being witty and funny and stuff like that character. That's part of it. That's part of the charm of the movie. But I think that the music really does help to add to that as well.
And we've talked about it before where giving either a city or a time or a setting its own character really helps define a movie on its own. So like kind of giving like his ship having the character with the different things going wrong and like how it like read different ways and all of his gear and then like you were saying the sound kind of going with those things really helped set the world and each different timeline kind of separately and really helped ground it in this is where we're at right now. But this thing is from the future, which is why it works this way. Or this is where we're at right now. So now it kind of interacts differently and we want to portray it a little bit differently. So it was cool how they kind of use those effects to their advantage.
Callbacks and Easter eggs, I have 3.
Go for it.
Uh, Easter egg number 1, when they're in the woods being chased by the people that are trying to capture Ryan Reynolds'
Hmm.
character. The same sound effect from The Return of the Jedi when they're doing the speeders, because
Okay.
they get on those little they
I
get
was
on those little
wondering.
scooters. They get on those
Yeah.
little scooters and they're chasing them. There's a quick clip where you hear like, the speeder sound from the speeder bikes on the forest moon of
Mm,
Endor in, Return of the Jedi. I think that's a little bit of a nerdy
interesting.
reference.
That's pretty sweet.
Obviously, the lightsaber.
Yeah,
The lightsaber
obviously.
is huge. There was one more that was off the top of my head. It was the lightsaber, it was the oh, and then with the, VR headset and everything, I mean, that was very reminiscent of, like, Ready Player One.
Yeah, yeah, when he's, like, having the fully immersive video game, and his dad was the person that, like, designed it for him, it definitely felt had that Ready Player One feel. There is one other kind of smaller Easter egg that's not, like, necessarily a direct Easter egg. When the younger version lands in the plant with the saber and he does the three-point landing, it's the, like, Deadpool superhero landing.
It was a total reference
Superhero
to
landing!
Deadpool.
Superhero landing, she did it, way to go, and
It
then,
was a
like,
reference
his
to the
younger
first
self did
Deadpool,
it.
that's a good one. That's
Yeah,
a
that
good
was
one,
good.
man, I missed that. There's probably more, I mean, I only watched the movie one time, but
Yeah.
what were some things, Alex, that, didn't work for you? The movie was, I think, great. I think it was in my opinion, better than just a good time. I think that it had a lot to say,
Mhm.
but it wasn't perfect. So what were some things that kind of fell short for you?
I mean, I mentioned it already, but, like, the DNA thing where it can tell that your body is damaged, and so now it doesn't work was a little weird, and that was definitely the plot device of him needing his younger self to pilot the ship, and I thought it was interesting that the Air Force is what got him into time travel, like, that was kind of like he started at the Air Force Academy or whatever, and then became a time pilot with that, and it was just kind of a weird transition for me. Other than that, like, nothing really stands out in my head. I mean, obviously, the end scene with the collider was just a lot of CG and a lot of, like, moving parts and everything, the bullet curving at the end was a little weird for me, where, like, it was a cool bit when he's like, "Well, you said it was hollow point, so I knew it was magnetic," or, like, knew it was like, metal bits in it. Still felt a little weird because I feel like even though it's a powerful magnet, a bullet moving that fast wouldn't take that hard of an angle. Uh, like, I think I don't know, that was a little forced, but it's also, like, sci-fi suspension of disbelief type thing. I loved the fact that Zoe Saldana's character had been there for, like, 8 years and just had an arsenal because she lived in America and it made sense.
Mhm.
Like
The villain character, basically a little bit more character and a little bit more arc. Because at the end, you know what, it would've made a better choice for her to have the arc? I was expecting when the bullet slowed down, when she shot it, that her younger self was gonna jump in front of the bullet,
yeah, that's kinda what I
and
thought was gonna
that would have
happen.
been a that would have been a pretty interesting character arc for her
Yeah.
because she goes from being like, "Oh, like, you're never gonna escape being this selfish, person in the future." And so her
Mm.
younger self decides, but then it might have messed up the timeline because if she kills herself, it's weird, so I don't know if they thought of that, but she ends up killing herself anyway, but she's just sort of standing there like involuntarily kills herself, which I thought would have
Yeah,
been cool if
jumped in front of the bullet.
she's very
Yeah.
selfish character, but then she saves them from herself in a way that might have been a little bit cooler of a character journey. Because I didn't think she was a bad character, but I thought that she was way underdeveloped, and some of the stuff with her didn't make sense. Like, why is she out there with the soldiers when she's like this boss, of the timelines or whatever. I thought that I don't know how I'm not a movie guy. Like I can't like make a movie like especially one that would be as good. So I don't want to like say that I would do something better. But those are just some things that stuck out for me for not why this movie isn't that perfect 10 out of 10. But it's really close to that because of the other things that work so well. It's actually a little bit late actually right now that we're recording
Yeah.
this, but and I'm a little bit tired, but I'm also, we're both movie fans, so we could talk
Oh,
about this
yeah.
stuff
We
for a
can
while
talk
too.
we
But
can talk cinema all day long.
oh yeah, literally. But sort of wrapping all this up, Alex, if you were gonna describe this movie or give a recommendation for it, what are your final thoughts? Like your what would you say to someone if they're saying, "Hey, I'm thinking of checking out the Atom Project."
As far as, like, recommending it to someone, I would definitely recommend it as a feel-good movie, but still an action movie. Depending on who I'm talking to, obviously, I would kind of shape the argument in either one of those directions as to why they would want to watch it. It's not just an action movie, and obviously a main selling point is Ryan Reynolds. He's pretty great in a lot of the roles he does. I think it's a fun 2 hours or a little under 2 hours of a movie that's just fun to watch. And if you want to have something that is a easy to watch movie that you don't have to think about, but is still thought provoking, this is kind of the way to go. And if you want something to watch with the whole family or by yourself, it can be either. Like you can go either direction and it's an enjoyable movie to watch. To close it out, I would definitely say if you had any questions about if you would enjoy this movie or if some of your friends might enjoy this movie, hopefully we've kind of talked you into going and watching it either on your own or with some friends or family. It's a great movie, and it's got a lot of good themes and can apply to pretty much anybody. So I think it's definitely a good watch and on Netflix, which a lot of people have, so pretty accessible as well. So I would definitely say check it out.
Thank you guys so much for being here once again. Alex, thank you so much, buddy, for being here, man.
Of course, yeah, love talking movies with you.
And we're just going to leave it at that for this episode. Be sure to join us next time for another review lounge. We're not sure exactly what we're going to be talking about next time, but definitely tune in expecting to hear just some honest conversation, some laid back, chill sort of vibe, and definitely getting into some of our favorite movies and shows and some games and some other things that we're excited to be talking
Mhm.
about. And we're just excited and we're passionate, as you guys can probably tell from what we've been talking about so far and how we talk about. But definitely let us know what your thoughts are on Atom Project. Let us know what your thoughts are on the movie and what your takeaways were. This is all part of a conversation that we want to have with other people and bring you into our community here, and just have this be another platform for you to share and to express how you feel about it.
Be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Like LJ said, feel free to leave comments about what you thought of the movie. Kind of give us your thoughts, and we can kind of reply with how we thought about it as well. If you're listening to this on Spotify or other podcast networks, feel free to give us a follow. If they have ratings on them, please rate us so that way we can get on other people's radar, tell your friends about it, and just have a new place for different people to come and just listen to guys talk about movies.
We're not experts, but I hope that you guys know that we're not experts here. We're just a couple of guys, and yeah, we just appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk about this movie and talk about other things that we enjoy. And yeah, we gotta call it here. I gotta I gotta stop
We
talking.
got
So
ended at some point.
we gotta end it at some point. But yeah, so just join us again next time for our next discussion. Until next time, you guys have a great evening or day or whenever you're listening to this, and we'll see you guys in the next one.